Just want to start by thanking you for just making the time and space and be available for this interview with this newsletter. What if it all works out? I mean, you're an educator, you're a strategist, you're a storyteller, and now you're a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker.
I know, who would have ever thought, right? My goodness.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
incredible. And I
it's
just want to start with like, who was little you? Like before the titles and all of those things, who were you?
I would say, someone who is always telling stories, even from a young age, some of them being kind of tall tales and fibs that would get my, butt whipped. But, just always using my imagination, allowing my imagination to kind of run away with me. Always interested in other people's narratives. And it's so funny that I'm doing a documentary because I've always loved documentaries, like from, a young age. I just love listening to them and, seeing autobiographies and backstories and wanting to know what made a culture tick. I've always been just fascinated by culture and cultural movements and sociocultural movements. And when I thought about what was happening with Black women, I think it brought me kind of 360 in a way where I see this socio-political movement happening, but it doesn't look the way that it typically has in the past.
Yeah.
And so I felt like there was a lot of story and a lot of momentum that was being not archived, right? That was being overlooked.
Yeah, yeah. And I would love to just kind of go back. I mean, now that, we're sort of talking about this, I know you, prior to kind of taking on this work, you moved through some pretty powerful institutions, like in the country. I was looking at just your bio, NASA, Amazon, Freddie Mac, but still staying really deeply rooted in care and cultural healing. Did you know, or could you have anticipated when you were in those spaces that this is sort of the path that your career would take you?
I think so because I was always ending up doing something where it was about group transformation. So I spent a lot of time in strategic transformation, which really was trying to get folks onto, new systems, new way of thinking about finance and technology. And all of those required like cross-functional working and figuring out what makes teams and groups tick and what are those kind of underlying things that folks might not see behind the narrative and what's the real subculture there, right? So I feel like this was kind of directly aligned, but I have always, yeah, considered myself just sisterly. I love Black women. I love sisterhood in all its forms. And so, this was kind of like, of course, I want to kind of focus and dig in deep with what's going on with the group I'm part of and one that I literally like cherish so deeply.
Which, kind of, I mean, this is something, that I feel like everyone should be aware of. Talk to me a little bit more about kind of these astonishing numbers and, what are you seeing in this work are themes that are coming up that's informing you?
Yeah, the numbers are really alarming. And so, what we do know, looking at the Department of Labor statistics, is that based around the layoffs themselves, we're looking at that 33% higher rate of increase of Black women who are being, forced out of their federal employment, right? Comparative to that 3%, right? For those in other categories. We also know that for Black women, they're looking at an average of 6 months when they are laid off to find a position, and that tends to be longer than their white counterparts as well. Beyond that, one of the numbers that really blew me away was reading a study that talked about how Black women age 7.5 years faster than our white counterparts internally, right? So when we're looking and seeing and doing those comparatives cellularly, this is impacting us in very real ways. I mean, it's literally throttling our life force. And so, when we look at the numbers that we're seeing, and some of them are like, we're looking at like 300,000. I've seen 300, I've seen 350,000. I've seen some more kind of creeping toward that 400,000 range. Whatever it is too freaking many, and it's disproportionate. And that's the big blow. It's disproportionate because it's designed to be disproportionate, right? And so the whole question that I had was like, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to kick and scream and into the void again where people won't listen, already don't have the empathy for us? We've seen that. That's been studied. There's no big, huge compassion when you're crying. It tends to make people upset actually when Black people or Black women especially start to cry. It doesn't fit within the expectation theory. So, what are we going to do? Well, we can turn to each other. And I think that's what's happening. More and more Black women are turning inward, more are moving and living abroad. And we talk about that in the documentary as well. They're just saying, I have to save myself. Screaming isn't going to help me.
Yeah. So let's just talk about the documentary and, for those who aren't familiar with it, why 92? And just talk a little bit about what sparked the idea of the project and why now.
Yeah. So I run a small group. It's a collective called the Connie Collective, and it's just so sisterly. It's so warm, and it's just Black women really supporting each other. We do calls like once a month. Nothing, super huge. But one of the things that I noticed was that I was in consistent communication with Black women who were doing a lot of work on what's, been termed the Rest Revolution, Rest Rebellion, whatever kind of terminology you want to use, of this kind of tapping into self and into community to heal, right? To be able to come out stronger, wiser, and more whole without having to, get out there and march and kind of be the warrior for everyone else, right? And these women, I felt, may go kind of unnoticed as leaders within this particular space where they realized and recognized that Black women just didn't know how to do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like literally did not know how to do deep breathing. A lot of us don't deep breathe. We kind of take very
Mm.
shallow breaths, throughout the day. And then you have like a Lisa Hurley who has the Excel application, where you can learn that kind of stuff and that breath work and, you can learn somatic healing. So there was that. And I wanted those techniques. I wanted those tactics. And more than that, their stories to really be heard for the profound wisdom that they offered.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like so much of the work is happening in pockets and sort of silos. And you hear about it anecdotally. I think we're leaning so much into community for healing. It's just so necessary. What did this reveal to you about Black women's visibility, but also our erasure?
One thing I think that it let me really understand is that this is also work,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like this also takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time, and it's not something that can be taken lightly, right? Your healing is really a radical thing. It's a radical type of process, and so I think that for me was the kind of biggest finding that I had in working with these women. And as you mentioned, people are doing different things. Different women are doing different things in different pockets, and they all have unique audiences and different ways of thinking about things. And I wanted to pull some of those thoughts and women together to say, yeah, you founded this group and you founded this group and you founded this group. And what is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're learning?
yeah,
And I guess the most interesting thing to me is that they've all had tidbits of wisdom that are different, than the other parties, right? So even though there's so much of the work going on, there's so many different ways to view it,
yeah.
that no matter what kind of sister you are, there's something there for everyone. I wanted to introduce that in a collaborative and cohesive way.
Yeah. How has your own journey informed this? Because a lot of this work feels so deeply personal. I think a lot of it you have had to experience it, right? To kind of understand some of the needs. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think for me, I definitely am not one of these women that have, like I don't want to purport to be like, I don't have that. I don't have that thing. I've seen it done and I know Black women that are just so powerful in helping folks move through that. I have not, like I'm unhealed. But I think that for me, it was just a matter of wanting to be able to at least tell the story. I don't know if I'll be able to like participate in really doing that kind of holistic type of healing and where you're able to move past generational traumas and so forth. I may never be able to get there, right? I understand now more than ever what it takes, but the least that I can do is be able to document it. And so for my own story, I think it's understanding and understanding that I had values that I think were imposed and not necessarily my own, right? So I even have to start there. Like I have to start with, why did you want, this type of home? Why did you want this type of situation? Um, was it really you or was it prescribed,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for me, I'm at square one, and that's kind of like square one is trying to figure that part out.
The honesty and humility of that. I don't know if you and I have chatted about this, but that is sort of the subject of my book is interrogating that. Like, the why of how did we get here? What does it look like to sort of reclaim our relationship with our own ambition, in a way that feels healthy. And you're right, it's so deeply layered. Like I feel like when I pull back one thing, then there's another thing, right? There's kind of the generational trauma that informs a lot of that. There's home life, there's birth order. I mean, there's so
Yes.
many things
Oof.
that factor into why we approach it this way. And I love that honesty, but also just the offering that this project is, in that you're like, let me amplify kind of the voices of those doing the work and those that are healed, because I think we need to see that it's possible.
Yes.
Because sometimes it does feel like it's just so far off. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention sort of Trisha Hersey and the Rest is Resistance movement, is sort of kind of really sort of guiding a lot of conversations about, how we take ownership of rest. I love this kind of these additional layers that you have of like ritual and refusal. What has it taught you, though, about your own relationship with rest and visibility?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's taught me that I have to not just think about rest in terms of like getting some Z's, which is the only way I've ever been able to think about it, but literally how to kind of calm that chatter in your mind and kind of in your spirit and in your heart. Every day that I wake up, and like I mentioned, I shared, I'm not healed, right? I'm not. I get up and I have like this kind of burning feeling in my chest of things that need to get done, things that have to, be complete, or is someone going to see me not doing something that I need to be, emotional all the time? That ability to stop in the moment and to affirm yourself that you're okay, that even if something doesn't go 100% right, that's fine. Understanding that whatever folks' perception is going to be their perception, and being able to move on. That's rest. That's rest in action. And that's something that I'm really trying to kind of stay mindful of. And I think the other thing too is learning how to get less reactive.
Mm,
I spent a lot of my career in investment banking, and now even I'm back in banking, and I loved it there and had great partners, but it's not a warm and kind of fuzzy environment growing up in that system, and I did. And so learning how to not take everything so much as, a kind of attack that you have to move on immediately, didn't come natural to me, right?
yeah.
Like, what do you mean that this isn't, I can kind of tend to do that. So even taking a beat and response, and learning how to do that is a form of rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's peace, right? Like just being able to
Peace.
kind of, be at ease, and definitely something it's hard to reach for kind of when you're in it. And just speaking of the moment that we're living in,
Yeah.
with everything that's going on around us in the political climate, all of those things, I regularly say it feels like Black women are in the crosshairs in a lot of ways. I think there's a certain amount of bravery even in the posts that you and I do occasionally online,
Mhm.
right? And speaking to certain things. How do you, one, maintain the courage to keep speaking, and talking about your community and loving and healing within your community, but also sort of facing this very polarizing climate that we're in?
Yeah, I think I've always been that way. I've always been a person that would just say it. Sometimes it's to my own detriment, but I do feel like there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it,
Mm,
right? Like when I talk about what Black women are going through, I'm talking about it from my lens, right? And I'm talking about it as it relates to what's happening from a socio-political movement at the time. I try not to get, too individualized, too kind of in the weeds, too tit for tat, too petty about it, because I think that it's bigger than that. And I think that when you communicate that way, right? It can take some of that sting out where
Yeah.
folks want to kind of take that crumb, the one little dig that you did and run with
Right.
it. You're like, no, I'm talking about this from a holistic standpoint where no matter what, and the facts, right? The facts are that we're seeing hundreds of thousands of Black women disappearing from the workplace. That's a fact, and what we're going to do about it, that's a very necessary conversation. And so I think that I give people the benefit of the doubt there, and saying, hey, I'm talking about what's actually going on. These aren't figments of our imagination.
I guess my next question would be, should we be holding these systems accountable, or, or is it withdrawal? Is that how we should be thinking about it? I did this panel at South by Southwest a couple of years ago on burnout, and it occurred to me sort of in the middle of the panel, like, what if it's just broken?
Yeah.
Like, what if there isn't a way back in? What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. I do think that it could be repaired because I'm an optimist, right? And because to be honest, and I love America. I love,
Yeah.
I'm a ninth generation American. My family served in pretty much every war this country has ever been in on both sides of my family. And regardless of the kind of oppression and, all the struggle I do love America a lot. And it's a love abuse type of relationship. And so I can't say that I don't have hope for my country, but what I can say is that I also have hope and more hope. And if I had to bet, I would bet on Black women to be able to create something else, that there's alternatives. Alternative places to heal, to grow, to raise happy, robust children and families that don't require inclusion in the system, So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I hope so. I hope that, that things can be repaired. But if I had to bet, on any horse, it would definitely be, my sisters that are in the race together. So
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, you said something so loaded there. Just, the systems that don't require inclusion,
yeah,
in the climate that we're living in right now, where, I mean, I think there was just another huge budget cut to DEI programming
yeah,
in the government. I mean, these programs rest in peace.
right.
How are you thinking about kind of this shift, and how do we respond in our
Mhm.
communities?
I think that DI required more nuance, right? Like, I think that what's happening now is that the different groups, that are marginalized and have been ostracized and oppressed within the country are really looking and understanding. There wasn't as much camaraderie, I'll say that, as we may have hoped, right? I think there were layers and layers of complexity. There were layers and layers of anti-Blackness that went across kind of intersections and stuff. And I think at this point, because we're seeing, the funding disappear, people are kind of retreating home, meaning to their kind of group and trying to figure out how they can make things work based on their own unique difficulties, their own unique circumstances. And I felt like some of that was already eclipsed in what we were, doing and having to prepare from a kind of large tent DEI space. So I think this gives us an opportunity to do the justice and to honor the distinctness, right, among these different groups and among these different parties, for that wholeness, healing, and for them to be able to determine what it is that we each need. Because I felt as if we each kind of needed something different, and lumping us into that one basket, I think did more harm than good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that, this has caused a lot of kind of critical assessment and analysis of the movement. And I think that's one thing that stands out for me a lot too. I was having a conversation with my mother-in-law recently where sort of she likened sort of this moment of inflection that we're in to the time when schools were integrated.
Hmm.
Back then, and she's born and raised in Caswell County, North Carolina. And she always talks about the fact that at that time it was scary to get on a bus and go to these new neighborhoods and these other schools.
Hmm.
And she said, we didn't necessarily want to do that. We just wanted better education where we were,
Right.
and there were these kind of movements to build those things off. And it was lost a little bit, right? In this kind of effort to sort of meld everyone together. And I never thought about sort of integration and segregation from that lens and what was lost.
Oh,
Obviously, it's for the betterment of everyone to kind of have diverse
for sure.
places, but we did lose a lot. Yeah.
Man, that is such a tremendous conversation for you to have had with her because when now they're trying to incorporate some of the techniques and tactics that Black teachers were using in those segregated environments.
Yeah.
I mean, those students, even though they didn't have much, were outperforming. And so there's books like I think it's the Pink Slip, that shows and talks about, the Black principles that were dismissed. They were coming along so well, actually, that there was a lot of interference and employs and sneak tactics.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we are going back, and who would have thought, going back into the Jim Crow South, to pull out some of those tools and tactics and techniques that were centered around the way Black children learn circularly, and holistically, and embedding them again.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, when you talk about sort of being an optimist and being hopeful, I think that is sort of what's kept me moving through this period too, because I look at history,
Mhm.
and I think about the things that we've overcome, what we've built as a people, and I'm like, well, imagine what will come from this moment, right? It,
Right.
it, it feels dark right now. I also have lots of military service members and a kid of cops, who take ownership and pride in what our ancestors have built in this country. And for that reason, I think there's that great James Baldwin quote, we reserve the right to criticize it for that reason.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love kind of what you're demanding, but what the space that you're creating as well. For folks that are sort of just learning about this, where are you in the process with your documentary? How can we support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can find out more about us by today because we're putting it up on ikoni.org. So you can visit us there. It's ikoni.org. We are rounding out our Kickstarter as well. So that should be done probably in the next 4 days here, which is great. We passed our milestone thanks to everyone who offered us such beautiful support. And now we're like working, and I can't believe it. We have an executive advisor in Dr. Janice Collins, who's a multi-Emmy Award winner and like a ray of sunshine to be around and to deal with, and to work with. And so we're, building this in it very intentionally. And so right now, that's the phase we're at. We're doing our pre-interviews, we're getting prepared. And we want to bring this to bear like early fall. So we're looking at, October timeframe, late October, kind of maybe early, well, that's not early fall, but like late October, early November. And yeah, I felt like let's not prolong this because I think that there's an urgency around it. And I know everyone looked at me like I was nuts, like, are you serious? But I'm like, I think we can do this. I think that we can, for the space and the time that we're in.
Yeah.
We don't want to miss it. We don't want to miss the moment. And so we're working diligently on that. And then there's very specific ways that I want this to look. And so I'm not going to compromise on that. I think that a lot of the time, the way that we're shot, Black women, it's very harsh. It's very downtrodden. Even when you look at the lighting, when you look at we're not shot often with a soft lens, with a soft kind of gaze. I want all that to be different. And I really want it to feel sensory and I want it to feel very, very safe. That when you see it, you're like breathing through it.
That sounds so beautiful. And I'm just grateful to be able to kind of witness this from the outside looking in, what you're building. I know so many of us want to be able to pour in and support you. So visit ikoni.org, you said,
Thank you.
to
Yep.
learn more about that. And I'm so happy that fall, like that's right around the corner. So
I
that
know. We're like getting moving. I don't know if I'll have any friends left after this. Maybe they'll like me afterward, like I'm showing. But
See it all come together. They'll
it has to, because I'm like, we got to get this done. I want to do
yes,
this for
yeah.
Black women in a very certain way, and I wanted to show in a certain way. But I hope that it kind of gives us that thing, that you can kind of turn on. And for me, I have like horrible anxiety, and so one of the things I always love to watch. For now, I'll put it on, put her on. It's like Meghan Markle's little show with like
Yeah.
the little doodads, like nothing's gonna jump out at me.
No.
There's no like drama. Her husband's not cheating. Like I don't
Right.
have to deal with any of that. I can
Yeah.
just like,
Yes.
there's no lifetime moments that are
Right.
coming. It's just kind. It's just nice, and we get nice soft shots, right?
I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I want to say thank you so much for having me, and I admire you. I admire all the work that you're doing. I cannot wait for this book. So please let us know what
Yeah.
we can do to promote it and to support you, Sister Faye. Or just thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singleton.